my fellow citizens, at this hour, American and coalition forces are in the early stages of military operations to disarm Iraq, to free its people, and to defend the world from grave danger.
The 2003 invasion of Iraq was over in a matter of days. Efforts to rebuild Iraq's national institutions while countering an insurgency required different tools.
Afghanistan and Iraq are both cases where we got involved without studying the problem well enough.
Among those who were most enthusiastic supporters of the Iraq War, I think they were convinced or came to believe that there would be no need for nation building after the United States deposed Saddam Hussein because there were a lot of people just waiting in the wings to create a functioning democracy as soon as Saddam Hussein was removed from power.
I was stunned really by the degree to which we knew a great deal about Saddam Hussein's weapons programs and military, and about the Ba'ath Party, and very little about the tribal or religious makeup of Iraq. And that meant that when we went into Iraq, we didn't have the intellectual basis we needed to do proper planning.
As U.S. defense capabilities expand, so do concerns over the militarization of American foreign policy.
Clearly, the center of gravity had moved to the Pentagon, where it remains. And that, I think, has become even more true under the Trump administration, where the State Department has not only having its budget cut, but it's been downgraded in more subtle ways as being just a rather sort of useless tool of an outdated world.
Now there is an emphasis on downgrading soft power. The Trump administration is talking about relying much more heavily on hard power, particularly military power. I think that's a mistake.
If you don't fund the State Department, then I need to buy more ammunition, ultimately.
After 2001, as we first flexed and used our military power, it became pretty obvious how long the dog's leash was. We should seek to have a very, very strong military that in the minds of our foe is unbeatable. And part of that involves only using it when you absolutely have to.
To critics, Washington is not taking advantage of the array of soft power tools at its disposal.
There is the saying, when you have a really big hammer, everything looks like a nail. You see in the United States a tendency to resort to using the military for things that many other countries would assign to diplomats or to non-military agencies or even to NGOs. Such a large share of the security budget is military in nature. It's not so surprising that we use our military as often as we do.
There are only so many situations you can shoot your way out of. Most situations are best resolved through diplomacy, and unfortunately we deprive ourselves of that option by underfunding our diplomacy. It's our biggest mistake as a great power.
How do you go about encouraging the growth of democracy in a place like China? Well, you don't do it with aircraft carriers.
You have to be clear about what soft power can do for you. It cannot patrol the seas. It cannot reassure allies the way boots on the ground can, a forward presence can. So there's a role for both.
We have acted for too long like we are not the preeminent military global power. And I think we are now reasserting ourselves. And that's why that's going to be painful, I think, in the next several years, because there's multiple crises that are coming to a head all at the same time. And that is not because the United States is the greatest military power on earth. It is because our presidents have not acted as though we are.
Some suggest a foreign policy which more adeptly blends hard and soft power is needed, a smart power approach.
It's a combination of how we use our powers of intimidation and our powers of inspiration. I think the powers of intimidation should be viewed like a spice that you put in food. The fundamental power that we want to nurture as a country are these inspirational qualities that America has.
As somebody who's spent quite a bit of time negotiating, hard power is my greatest ally at the negotiating table. Unless there is a threat, there's a worse alternative than negotiating. There's really not much of an incentive for some of these parties to actually come to the negotiating table in the first place.
Our diplomacy is the most important way to avoid having to use our military forces. The old saying about Sparta, the purpose of the Spartan army was to give credibility to Spartan diplomacy. But the purpose of Spartan diplomacy was avoid having to use the Spartan army.